but we do have the trainers now in front of us with the matchups. Renzo on the left with Rillaboom, Ogerpon Wellspring, Landorus Incarnate, that Okie Dokie, Gouging Fire, and Chien-Pao versus Lens, Lycanroc, yes, midday form, Corviknight, Dragonite, Tyranitar, Amoonguss, and that pesky little Garchomp.
Pesky little Garchomp.
I say that now.
Say it now. Is this a foreshadowing for what we'll see? But really interesting matchup, because if you look at Renzo's side of the field, he's got some good answers to a lot of the big threats on Len's side. You know, you look at the Corviknight, you say, well, where's the fire type? Well, you've got Gouging Fire there. Perfect answer for the Corviknight, really. Almost forces a Terastallization in some situations. You've got the Chien-Pao for the Dragonite, the Garchomp as well. Really have to be careful around that. And including that as well is going to be the Tyranitar. But the Chien-Pao going to have to be careful because it has got that Focus Sash, so the sand will chip that. It will break that Focus Sash throughout the battle. So you've got to be really careful if you are wanting to utilize that to its full potential in this game, and be careful not to allow that Sash to go down and have protection alongside it. The Okie Dokie as well is another Pokemon that's going to provide good answers, switch-ins in particular to the Lycanroc and any sort of rock slide. Potential, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, we do have Rillaboom with the Meadow Plate, something to call out as well with that Taunt, something maybe set up in order to be able to have as your sort of anti-hard Trick Room mode. You know, you've got the grass terrain, you do have the potential of being able to at least disrupt any setup Pokemon, as well as, you know, a Trick Room setup and whatnot. So a really nice little utility pocket there of being able to dive into. But like you said, I think it's great to be able to see Okie Dokie in action. I do like Gouging Fire, a combination of the Howl with the Chien-Pao and the Okie Dokie. It can really push the damage output to ridiculous heights, especially when you combine the Sword of Ruin ability.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is something that Len's going to really have to keep an eye on. And I think that Taunt that you outlined there with the Rillaboom, it's something that you can utilize extremely well against that Amoonguss in particular, that Len could probably lean on quite heavily in this game to allow some of the big hitters in his team to either get in favorable positions to set up and things like that, which is going to be, I think, you know, Len could use that as bait against the Rillaboom and maybe have something like the Corviknight on the field. And you've got to look at that loaded dice on the Dragonite as well, because it has got access to that scale shot as well, which is not something we commonly see at all.
No, it really isn't, but it's such a great little move. You're able to not only have that multi-hit functionality with it, but you do have the increase of its speed at the cost, of course, of its defense. So really nice little play. But that Lycanroc midday Focus Sash, Endeavor, Rock Slide, Protect, and Close Combat. It gives me a bit of Whimsicott, Focus Sash, Endeavor vibes.
It's a scary proposition, really, when you look at it, because if you take it down to that Focus Sash, you've got to be prepared to take those Endeavors, because Lycanroc naturally going to be probably the fastest thing on the field. And it does have to be careful around the Rillaboom, of course. You do have that Grassy Glide threat, which can deal with it pretty effectively, but everything else on the team on Renzo's side is going to be susceptible to that Endeavor, which will take the opponent down to 1 HP if it is on the Sash.
Yeah. No doubt about it. But of course, Renzo, we know, as we mentioned, he was the Players' Cup 4 champion. He has gotten a couple of great other accomplishments. Top 4 Sao Paulo Regionals 23, Top 8 Santiago 2023, and of course, Top 8 at Curitiba in 2024 recently. And I think we've spoken a bit about Len. He has, of course, been running this sort of archetype that we see in front of us with Sand over time, but he did actually get recently a top 16 in Knoxville Regional, so he's definitely looking on form, especially with this 4-0.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. He's so familiar with this, even in this current format, this composition. He's just so well versed with it, and Len has been playing for one of the longest running players in the VG scene,
history,
you know, history. Yeah. So I mean, very experienced player, always produces very consistent results. Extremely. Knows everything really that you would want to know about. He's not going to really get surprised by things, knows how to approach matches, not really going to overcompensate in games, and very good at kind of finding and eking out those win conditions, especially with the team and the comfort that he's got with that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But I'm quite intrigued to actually see a bit of this Corviknight, whether you feel it may come into play here, because we do know it has Mirror Armor as ability, may be able to negate any options for Renzo wanting to try to prefer going for breaking swipes in order to get the usual attack drops, but you actually force that attack drop onto Gouging Fire itself. But it's sort of in a position where as long as it gets a Howl for its partner Pokemon, that's more crucial. And then if you're better placed to be able to go on the offensive with that Gouging Fire, then you make the play. But there are a lot of Pokemon over on Len's side that they do really threaten that fire typing, you know, being able to at least have the Lycanroc with the speed increase with the Sandstorm in activation via the Sand Rush ability. It really just outpaces everything there is. It's just so naturally fast as a Pokemon, and the fact that it goes with a Focus Sash means that you're most likely going to be outspeeding everything on the field.
Well, talking about that Corviknight, we are getting into game one here. Len leading off with the Corviknight and the Dragonite, and Renzo leading off with the Gouging Fire and the Ogerpon Wellspring form.
Yeah, we've got the speed being heightened via that booster energy, but Corviknight Dragonite is a really interesting combination here. You do have the Mirror Armor, like we mentioned, being able to at least scare off the use of the Breaking Swipe here, but being able to have Ogerpon Wellspring straight on the field does allow you to be able to at least maneuver yourself to maybe dedicating a full Water Terrestrialization, full offensive play to remove the Grass type weakness to any sort of moves coming out from the other side of the field with the flying types and go pure damage.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to see here. The Terrestrialization coming out on the Ogerpon, getting that Embody Aspect ability activated, giving a special defense boost. Not helpful in front of these physical threats, but a Heat Crash coming out straight into the Corviknight. Going to do big damage here from that Gouging Fire, and it leaves the Ogerpon open to get a big attack off in return as well. There's a double up coming into this slot. And it looks like the Ivy Cudgel will be attacking into this.
Oh, and it just misses the KO there, so not quite enough to be able to finish the job off. Scale Shot with its loaded dice item coming into fruition here. Not quite enough to pick up a KO, barring any sort of critical hits, but not actually fully committing and hitting all 5 of its hits. But most importantly, it will be able to start getting that speed increase in combination with the Tailwind. Surely it is enough to be able to outpace this Gouging Fire.
That's a huge survival here from the Corviknight, just barely hanging on and getting that Tailwind off. So pivotal for this next turn as well, because now it allows the Corviknight to get an attack off into potentially the Ogerpon. You can go for a Brave Bird there, potentially pick up the knockout. You have to be careful around the Spiky Shield, of course, but it does open the door for the Dragonite to get some use, especially into that Gouging Fire, that it is going to be susceptible to those scale shots.
Yeah, and it's a bit tough because you would have surely thought Heat Crash and the Water Terrestrialization Ivy Cudgel is enough to pick up the KO without any sort of Terrestrializations, but we already see Ogerpon going on the redirection approach right now, just wanting to at least avoid Gouging Fire going down. Critical hit won't matter, as the 4-hit coverage would have been enough to pick up the KO.
Yeah, it's a nice way to get rid of the Ogerpon here, and it does give the little bit of protection to that Gouging Fire here. Already damaged Ogerpon. The Terrestrialization for Renzo's now gone, though, so that's something to consider going forward, especially if you are Len. The Dragonite taking another defense drop, but again, another speed boost as well, so speed creeping. The Breaking Swipe coming out, not quite enough, but will activate that Mirror Armor ability, and now the Mirror Armor will go back onto the Gouging Fire.
Yeah, bringing it now down to -1 of its attack. We hadn't seen a Howl activation previously either, but Len has placed himself to the point where this Dragonite is going to be outspeeding everything, at least because of the double scale shots. Now, we saw how much damage it took from the Breaking Swipe because of the -2 in its defense, but Chien-Pao already brings such a huge problem to Len's current flowchart at the point, because it has access to priority. It does directly threaten a one-hit KO onto the Garchomp, if, of course, it can connect. But the most important thing is it's forcing Len to make more of a direct and aggressive approach play right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. I think you've got to look at the Dragon Knight here, and you've got to be careful going for the Sucker Punch as well if you are the Chen Pao, maybe trying to get rid of the Dragon Knight because the extreme speed's there, but not going to see that. We have the Burning Bulwark coming out from the Gudging Fire. It is going to protect itself for this turn, as well as that Chen Pao. Just wanted to scout out what Len is trying to do this turn.
Yeah, it's a really nice scout here, as you do have the potential of picking up a burn, as it seems is the case. Len's not going to be mighty happy from that. Of course, it will be halving its damage output in half. Garchomp opting to go for the Earthquake. Really nice synergy, and I feel similar sort of archetype pairing we've seen in the past. Maybe not Dragonite, maybe it was a Salamence by the side in the good old days next to that Garchomp, but at this point, there's a lot that Len has to try to bring to the fore. He does have a final Pokemon that hasn't been revealed, but at the moment, Renzo has some really good momentum availability on his side.
Yeah, and you've got to consider as well that Len still has Terrestrialization at his disposal. So the Garchomp is threatened from the Chen Pao at the moment, but could go for that Terrestrialization into that Steel type. It's pretty risky in front of the Gouging Fire, because if Renzo calls that, then goes with a Heat Crash into that slot, you could potentially see yourself at a bit of a detriment and maybe even knocked out depending on the damage output here. But we are going to see it cost a Terrestrialization. Garchomp going for that Steel type.
Yeah, it is now. It wants to be able to at least survive the scenario. No priority coming out from this Chen Pao that could have opted to go for the Sucker Punch there. Scale Shot targeting down the Gouging Fire, but due to the burn, not enough to pick up the KO. If it wasn't in play, it would have surely been able to with that range. So Dragonite just waiting to get KO'd here. Len not wanting to try to risk any safe switch outs there. Garchomp actually moving first. Thanks, of course, to being able to have the Tailwind on its side. Picking up the KO on the Gouging Fire, though, is so crucial, especially with this defensive switch-up of no longer being able to be susceptible to an Icicle Crash KO.
Yeah, that is a huge turn here from Len, getting the Earthquake off, removing that fire threat after going for that Steel Terrestrialization. Not any risk anymore. The Icicle Crash coming out. Garchomp easily able to take that, and the Dragonite finally going down for Len. I think probably a turn too late, maybe, because we have seen what may come out in the back to support this Garchomp, but we'll have to wait and see for that final Pokemon here. But the Okidogi going to be the choice from Renzo, and this is going to be an interesting end to this game, and it is the Amoonguss.
Amoonguss has that potential of redirection, which is something that Len can really dive into utilizing here. Garchomp, we know it does have Substitute, but now that it is in its Steel Terrestrialization form, it is susceptible to those fighting type moves, and Okidogi really wants to best place itself right now in just going on the offensive. We know it's Assault Vest, it just wants to pick up the damage where it can, but what Renzo has to take into consideration is any sort of protect play that could come out from either of Len's side.
Not going to see that though. The Amoonguss going straight for the Rage Powder, going to redirect any attacks coming out, and that Icicle Crash going into that slot. Can it take it? It can just survive the Icicle Crash, and the Earthquake coming out. It is going to be enough to pick up the Chen Pao, and not the Okidogi, but take a huge amount of damage, taking the Amoonguss down with it.
So much damage, but what Len really needed was that KO. Thanks to the Sword of Ruin being in play, it allowed Len to try to take that play into consideration, but we see so crucial of a survival there. Okidogi goes ahead and all of a sudden wraps this game one up with the KO onto that Garchomp.
An absolutely huge end to the game. The Okidogi surviving barely after that Earthquake. You think, can it survive? It does survive.
Yep.
And the Garchomp, unfortunately, taking the Amoonguss down. That's a cost of using the Earthquake. Not quite enough to pick up the knockout there. And Okidogi being the big play here for Renzo to take a lead in this round 5.
It's a bit tough because I feel like in that situation, if Len didn't go for the Earthquake, is there a scenario where the Garchomp could at least have been able to run away with that game 1? It does have the potential of going for the substitute. We know that it needs to get an Earthquake off at some point in order to hopefully pick up the KO onto the Okidogi, but you want the Sword of Ruin to still be available. So it sort of forces Len into a situation where he feels like he has to go on the immediate offensive whilst Chen Pao's in play to try and pick up that win con.
Yeah, you can see the line of thought from both players here. I mean, there's a big survival here from the Corviknight. I think this was a huge turn in this game here with the double up into that Corviknight. You can see how useful that Citrus Berry is here, taking the Heat Crash and then the Ivy Cudgel as well on top of that. Just barely hanging on to allow that Tailwind to be set up and then put Len into a position where he was able to really capitalize with that speed control going forward. The Dragonite again surviving here, that breaking swipe and taking an attack drop, but I think at this point really in a good position with that additional speed boost to start really disrupting things on Renzo's side of the field. But he didn't panic at this stage. I think he really was quite composed throughout this game and took it right down to the wire, as we are seeing here with the Garchomp when it did come onto the field and was able to get rid of that gouging fire. But the Dragonite getting caught with that burning bulwark, and that probably a little bit of to detriment on Len's side.
Yeah, I think so. And I was trying to think if there's a way right now where perhaps instead of going for Earthquake and picking up a KO on your own Amoonguss, you could try to go for Dragon Claw into the Okidogi and force an Earthquake to come out the following turn in order to guarantee pick up that additional chip required onto the Okidogi, because it would have just been focusing Drain Punch into the Amoonguss, right?
Yeah, the other option there would have been maybe protect the Garchomp, try and get a Spore off into the Okidogi, knowing that it is Assault Vest, but it's risky because the double up could come into that slot.
But, of course, we do have our Game 2 leads from both trainers. Len going for the same strategy as Game 1, Corviknight and Dragonite, versus the Chien-Pao and Ogerpon switch-up.
Yeah, a bit of a switch up here. Maybe prioritizing Renzo, the Gouging Fire for later on in this game, knowing how useful it can be in this matchup, especially with those breaking swipes, especially if the Corviknight gets into a position where it can get the Tailwind up. You know that the double up is not enough, so maybe going down a different route this game. Go for that Icicle Crash, maybe it's a neutral into the Corviknight. Will that, with the Sword of Ruin and the double up from the Ogerpon, be enough to pick up the knockout onto that Pokemon before that speed control is able to be set up?
Ooh, as we have the defensive play from the Dragonite, not wanting any sort of business with this Chien-Pao on the field for good reason due to the Icicle Crash focus there, but no terrestrialization following through with what we saw in Game 1 from Renzo. Unfortunately for himself, he double slotted into that Dragonite, allowing for a oh-so-free Tailwind setup from this Corviknight.
Yeah, it's a really free turn there for Len and a really good protect as well at the same time, catching out Lorenzo. Unfortunately for him, now the Tailwind's up and the Corviknight in such a healthy position, going to be able to threaten both the Ogerpon and that Chien-Pao. That's what we're seeing. It protects here, doesn't want to take any unnecessary damage this next turn.
Yeah, you surely want to be able to stall out the turns of Tailwind until the later half of the Tailwind turns expire in order to better position yourself and have the speed advantage the subsequent turn after you go for the full damage.
Yeah, and now we are seeing the Brave Bird is going to be doubling into that Chien-Pao, really prioritizing that side of the field. And for good reason as well. You can potentially see the Follow Me coming out from the Ogerpon to maybe give the Chien-Pao a little bit of room, but also you want to prioritize that Pokemon. You want to get rid of the Sword of the Rune as soon as possible because it then weakens things like the Ogerpon, like that Gouging Fire, like the Okidogi that are going to come in, potentially take advantage of that ability later on in this game. So Len really focusing down on that slot. Now the Chien-Pao's pinned. Does Renzo pivot it out for something else, potentially taking a double up or to keep it on the field, try and get one attack off before it goes down?
I think at this point you really need to be able to be super cautious because this game could go either side depending on which slots you want to be targeting. We do see the Ogerpon opting to go for the terrestrialization. It wants to go for the full amount of damage, and because, of course, Len does have Tailwind set up, there's no terrestrialization indication from his side of the field. Scale Shot does focus down on Chien-Pao. This looks like if it gets all 5 hits, it may be able to just pick up the KO, but it's going to be extremely close and it's going to be huge. And it survives on what you would think is a Focus Sash, but it is not. It is 1 HP. It may be allowing it room to go for a move.
And the Brave Bird coming out, following up into the Chien-Pao, and that Focus Sash, imaginary Focus Sash, not quite enough to make that hold on there, but a huge knockout here for Len. Would have been more preferable to get that knockout with the Scale Shot and then the Brave Bird into the Ogerpon, but the Ogerpon left unscathed here, going for an Ivy Cudgel, doing some big damage to that Ogerpon and in the process, activating that Citrus Berry, giving it a nice buff to that HP stat.
Yeah, this is looking really good for Len at this current point. You've still got Tailwind pressure on the field. You've got the Corviknight at a relatively healthy amount of HP, where it can avoid a heat crash KO from that range. So it's going to be more so how Renzo could try to really amp up the momentum and swing it back to Len's side as the Tailwind now is going to expire the next turn.
Yeah, and you've got to be careful, I think, with the Gouging Fire on the field now, knowing that Renzo probably wants to stall out these Tailwind turns. You don't want to get caught in that Burning Bulwark situation again and have either one of your Pokemon out on the field at the moment burnt. So that's something to keep in mind. Probably maybe target into that Ogerpon this turn, but then if that's the thought of process, Renzo could maybe pick up on that and not protect the Gouging Fire and start utilizing some of those big threatening attacks, namely that Heat Crash into the Corviknight, try and remove that speed control from Len's side of the field.
But we are going to see a redirection from the Ogerpon, not going on the offensive. Gouging Fire will likely be able to outspeed this Corviknight, but it's not able to do so with the Dragonite due to the scale shot increase. 3 hits so far right now, trying to whittle this Ogerpon's HP down. No critical hit on that 4th one, and none on the 5th. The Ogerpon does survive. It may be allowed room to maybe act as well the following turn, dependent on what this Corviknight does.
Heat Crash coming out from the Gouging Fire, and the Corviknight once again hangs on.
No, it hangs on, it goes for the roost, and it's able to also recover all of that luscious HP it did just lose as Tailwind does now expire.
Now, it is going to be in the position here where it will be threatened by another Heat Crash. Of course, does need to be careful in particular from that scale shot that could come out and cause so much damage to it. But you do have the Ogerpon next to it. You do have the Follow Me for that one turn to try and pull away those scale shots and get that Heat Crash maybe onto the Corviknight this turn, or take advantage and try and go for a break-in swipe, because try and lower the damage on that Dragonite, and it has taken a bunch of defense drops as well. So the breaking swipe, although known for a big attacking option, could be enough at this stage to maybe even pick up the knockout on that Dragonite.
It's going to be a bit close, because there is also the option of going for another Heat Crash, hoping that it's a roll and hoping you can pick up a KO onto the Corviknight before it gets a Tailwind set up. But we're going to have to find out, as a scale shot, of course, we'll be able to dispatch of this Ogerpon, further increasing this Dragonite's speed to +3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and it is getting a bit out of control. Doesn't need to rely on that Tailwind anymore, but does need to be careful because of that defense stat, taking yet another defense drop. But also at the same time, one of the bonuses is a speed boost as well. Heat Crash coming out, and this time is enough to pick up the Corviknight. So the Gouging Fire able to remove the speed control from Len's side of the field.
But we do still have this Dragonite being able to be the fastest thing on the field, most likely. We're going to have to see, of course, the interaction. But the most crucial thing at this point is, what can Renzo do in order to maybe dispatch of this Dragonite? Because you're in a certain scenario where, okay, it's very weak in terms of its HP recovery, potential, but it does have the Amoonguss, which already amplifies that via its redirection.
Yeah, you would say normally in this situation, has the Okidogi got the opportunity to protect the Gouging Fire, you go for the attack into the Dragonite, dispatch of it that way, and then you can go from there. But with the Amoonguss, with this Rage Power that we're seeing now, it's going to pull all of those attacks to that side of the field, leaving the Dragonite open to go for that scale shot into the Gouging Fire.
Oh, into the Gouging Fire. We know that it is a very bulky Pokemon, but I'm not sure if it's going to be able to survive. Well, guess what? Now I am sure, because we see the critical hit connect. The Gouging Fire is out. It's not going to be able to pick up a Heat Crash KO that it would have really appreciated onto the Amoonguss, leaving the Okidogi on its lonesome self, wanting to try to pan out and force a win for the set. But Len is in a really prime position to force a Game 3.
Yeah, and the knockoff coming out onto the Amoonguss, going to knock off the Rocky Helmet, which is useful, but I mean, at this stage, it's just impossible, really, for Renzo to come back with the Okidogi, and we are going to see the forfeit locked in. The Dragonite, taking all of those defense drops throughout, but, the defense drops don't matter if you're not taking any damage.
Exactly. I think it's really cool to actually see a Dragonite sweep in this sort of approach and method. Scale shot with loaded dice isn't something that you commonly would be expecting on a Dragonite, so you want to be able to capitalize off of maybe a Choice Band in combination with a Chi and Power, let's say, or wanting to at least have normal extreme speed focus pressures onto opposing side of the field. But when you've got a Pokemon set like this, you still have extreme speed, just in case, but Iron Head is a third move of choice there in combination with Protect. You're able to guarantee as long as you got redirection support, or at least there's a threat on the other side of your end with another partner Pokemon, it gives it room. And that's exactly what we saw Len go ahead and accomplish in a really good way.
Yeah, and I think it really comes back to that turn 1 in the game too, where we saw Len go for that protect into the Dragonite and get the free Tailwind up with the Corviknight. Yep. Really went unpunished there, and from that point on, Renzo was in a really tough position there. The Ogerpon taking a lot of damage, not really able to stick around as long as what he would like it to have done to have that follow me support to allow the Gouging Fire. When it eventually came in after the Chen Pao, you know, mysteriously hung on with that invisible focus sash that it had in his back pocket. But yeah, I think that was the real key turn, and Len didn't really give up with that momentum swing from that turn 1, kept it going, closed out the game. Everything is back onto Lorenzo now to come back, readjust, and see how you can better handle the Dragonite, because that is the big threat going into this match. It's obvious the Corviknight is a threat, but once you are putting so many resources into that side of the field and trying to prevent the Tailwind from going up again, then you've got the Dragonite to deal with at the same time. It's very difficult. You've got to split your decision. You've got to really pick the targets right and not go in, doubling in to a protect this time around.
But we do have an alert. It is game 3 of this round 5. Chien-Pao, Ogerpon versus that Corviknight and Dragonite pairing yet again. Maybe wanting to try to focus down, like you said, on the Dragonite straight off the bat would be great, but there is also the mind game of the protect.
That is true. You don't want to go into the Dragonite now, fall for the same sort of situation that happened in that game too. So you go into maybe the Corviknight here because you know it has to go for that Tailwind to really get that Dragonite into position where it can go for the skill shots and then start setting itself up speed-wise. We see the protect coming out once again.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bait situation, as it seems like, unfortunately, Renzo did focus down on the Corviknight, but it did miss. So that is really huge right now. You know there's a potential of even picking up a flinch.
Oh,
wait!
it's
there's a critical hit! My lord, there's so many things going on. The Corviknight somehow survives. You have a critical hit, water terrestrialization, Sword of Ruin, and somehow this Steel Bird has been able to survive all of this onslaught.
That's 3 times it's been able to just hang on in the set. This is huge. Getting that Tailwind off is so important, especially for that Dragonite. We saw the importance of the scale shot and how strong it can be into that Chen Pao and really be able to be that option to shut it down, take that option away. It's the first thing you've got to do, and it is coming out here once again.
Oh, here it comes. Scale shot. Is it going to be enough to be able to unite all of Len's probabilities and being able to pick up the KO 30? No, it's a 4-hit rather than a 5-hit. Unfortunately, not being able to do so, which does allow Chien-Pao to perhaps try to focus that, but no, body press completely dispatches of it.
That is a huge turn here for Len, and a huge advantage being the Corviknight. You think isn't going to be able to outspeed the Chen Pao, but takes it down, leaving the Ogerpon to get another Ivy Cudgel off. But this doesn't matter. The Corviknight going down now has done its job. It's set the Tailwind up, and it's dispatched of that Chen Pao, making things a lot easier for this Dragonite to close out and do what it did in that game too, make it one step further for Len to taking this set.
Yeah, and it's a good way to be able to still get that focus pressure onto the field. Sure, it is quite unfortunate you weren't able to pick up the KO onto the Chien-Pao, but at least Renzo could try to capitalize off of that in bringing the Gouging Fire in a bit earlier to perhaps try to deal a bit with this Dragonite.
Yeah, and now we do see the Amoonguss hit the field for Len, so he is going to have that redirection available to pull any of those big threatening attacks away from the Dragonite here. You've got to look at Renzo's side of the field as well. The Ogerpon, the Wellspring form, has got access to Follow Me, so going to be able to pull in those attacks from the Dragonite as well. Maybe give the Gouging Fire a little bit of protection. The Amoonguss has to be careful as well around that Heat Crash, and then obviously the Breaking Swipe is something that you can utilize fully here because the Corviknight and the Mirror Armor ability are gone.
They are indeed, but if it hasn't already been hyped enough, I do believe we also have the Unite stream going ahead and watching us as well. So hello everybody, welcome in. You are in the middle of a Game 3 where things are extremely, extremely on fire.
And we are going to see a terrestrialization from Len, and it will be that Dragonite going for the Terra Fairy here, removing that Dragon weakness. And if we do see a Breaking Swipe from that Gouging Fire, going to have that immunity going into this next turn.
Oh, this is going to be so so crucial and big, but actually, rather than seeing the breaking swipe come out right now, we've got the burning bulwark. It does have the potential of picking up that burn, which is going to be so crucial in Len's strategy, but no, we have the complete ignore, focusing onto the Ogerpon, trying to at least deal as much damage as you can here, not picking up quite the KO from the looks of things and the range, and actually hitting 4 out of 5 times rather than 5 out of 5, but the crucial thing is at least it's in a 2-hit KO range and you didn't fall down to the bait.
Yeah, and now the Amoonguss doing such a great job because this Ogerpon is a pure water type. It can't ignore that Rage Powder. The Ivy Cudgel pulled into that slot, further protecting this Dragonite, getting away scot-free once again. Going to be in a position where it can fire off that scale shot once again. This turn, maybe into the Gouging Fire. Does it force the Ogerpon on Renzo's side of the field to go for that follow me to protect the Gouging Fire? But the Fairy Terrestrialization giving complete immunity from that breaking swipe.
But the important thing here is the redirection from Renzo's side. Double redirection, now one actually being followed suit with the Amoonguss over on Len's side in order to allow this Gouging Fire to enable itself and try to dispatch of the KO that it really, really needs to focus down onto this Amoonguss. Ogerpon sort of did its job. It was able to deal real good amount of damage as well as get the redirection going. But Renzo's final Pokemon as well as this follow-up move from the Gouging Fire are going to be really crucial into clarifying who is going to be able to run away with the set.
Yeah, and the Heat Crash coming out into the Amoonguss. Is it enough? It is enough to pick up the Amoonguss, take away that option of redirection. Now the Dragonite in a position where it doesn't have that support, but Len's still got one more Pokemon left, as well as Renzo. Like you say, it comes down to what these both trainers have. We know that Renzo's got that Landorus Incarnate. Can it be enough to pull this back for Renzo?
We're going to have to see, but there is a very fresh adaptation with the Landorus Incarnate now on Renzo's side. It does add a bit of interest here. We know that Earth Power is so powerful, boosted by the Sheer Force and Life Orb, and the Dragonite is no longer a flying type. It is now susceptible to it.
Yeah, you have to be careful if you want to launch off one of those Earthquakes here with the Garchomp. You can't do so freely into the Dragonite, as we do see that Landorus just protect here, maybe scouting out what Len is going to do this turn, as we do see a Scale Shot fired off into that Landorus, blocked by the Protect.
Blocked by the Protect, but more importantly, the Gouging Fire was completely ignored. Heat Crash tries to focus down on the Dragonite. 2-hit KO does put it in a really good stead right now. Dragon Claw, we see the double up on the Landorus. Len clearly identifying that this Landorus is going to be a real big issue and thorn on his side, but we know the Dragonite still outspeeds the Gouging Fire. Question is, if there's going to be another double up, can Landorus go for the double protect?
I think you've got to go for it, I think, if you are Renzo, because if you get that double protect off, it pretty much locks the game up for you. You go for the Heat Crash again into the Dragonite, you pick it up, and then you've got 2 versus 1 against that Garchomp, which gives you everything in your side of the field. But if you fail that double protect, the chances of it actually being happening, not going to happen here. The Scale Shot straight into it. The big question is it going to be enough?
Is it going to be enough? Indeed, so far at this range, it seems like, except if there's any sort of critical hit that may come into play, oh, it's definitely not enough. This Landorus is really shrugging off all the damage of all those scales being shot its way. Heat Crash does finish off the job on the Dragonite, allowing the Landorus to perhaps be able to move, but once again, depends on the speed training interactions of both of these Pokemon.
Yeah, and it is going to be down to the speed interaction. The Garchomp going for that Dragon Claw, picking up the knockout. So it is the Gouging Fire versus this Garchomp in the latter stages of this game.
And we've got a 1 versus 1. Gouging Fire not really liking its spot, if I'm completely honest, but we've got the breaking swipe, so a lot of real interesting situations going on right now. But a 2-hit KO guaranteed with a -1 of attack does mean Garchomp may or may not be able to pick up the KO onto the Gouging Fire, but at that range, it does not!
So close to picking up the knockout, but the Gouging Fire coming back with that breaking swipe. Taking enough damage, taking it down to -1 attack, putting it in a position now where it is going to be able to close up this game for Renzo. With one more breaking swipe, it is going to be enough.
Oh, but there's no Protect, and it does pick up the KO. Surely there could have been an opportunity for the Protect, get that leftovers recovery going, but no, Renzo runs away with that game 3 and gets that 5th 5th coveted win.
5-0 going into the next round. An amazing showing from Renzo and both Len, but what a game for us to kick into this round 5. And what a way to finish as well, coming right down to the wire between these two Dragon-type Pokemon. The Gouging Fire looked in a really awkward position there. The Earthquake threatening so hard, but the Breaking Swipe, such a useful move. And being a single target attack into that Garchomp was huge because it did just enough damage. And I think you made a good point where Len could have maybe went for that Protect there, but would it have been enough? How many Protects would you have needed to get another Earthquake off in that situation?
It'd be tough because I feel like it would come down to a roll, surely. We saw the -1 was able to, position yourself to the point where it would still guarantee a 2-hit KO. Like you said, if there was a -2 attack on Garchomp, it still is single target. And we know it's a spread move. It's 100 base power, basically. It's tough. And it's being dispatched by a very tough Pokemon, being Garchomp. But it would be extremely close. That's a guarantee.
Yeah, and we are just looking at some of the highlights from this match. This Corviknight throughout, surviving that huge critical hit, Ivy Cudgel, getting that Tailwind off and then setting the stage for the Dragonite once again. But the Gouging Fire, great call from Renzo, bringing it in the back, bringing it in at the right time and utilizing it to its full potential, just picking off the pieces that were beside that Dragonite throughout, and it came down to that Gouging Fire right at the end, being the MVP for Lorenzo to close this one up.
Yeah, we saw the Garchomp actually outpacing that Landorus, being a bit of an indication that most likely the training would have been to the maximum potential for its speed. So that's sort of like the theme, the intricate detail of being able to understand and, better process the speed benchmarks, right? Garchomp does have that slight advantage, but it was enough to be able to at least dispatch of the Landorus in that case. Maybe open lens up to a scenario where Garchomp can beat and 1v1 the Gouging Fire, but Gouging Fire, too hot to touch, clearly.
Yeah, I think you really got to identify that turn where Renzo went for the Protect onto the Landorus and the double up came into that slot, and it allowed just that initial Heat Crash damage onto the Dragonite. And I think that was really the turning point for Renzo, where he was able to get that momentum swing, put the Gouging Fire into such a good position where it opened the door for that Breaking Swipe play at the end. And then you're really relying on a critical hit Earthquake there. Even if you go for the Protect and you get a little bit of leftovers recovery, you manage to survive another Breaking Swipe. You're -2 at that stage. You really needed the critical hit. So it might have been an option to play for, but even then, you're really clutching at straws.
You are indeed, but I'll tell you who will definitely have the answers, and that will be Renzo himself. So we're going to go ahead and throw over to Charlie for a quick insight over for the winner's interview.
That's the camera, right?
Thank you so much, Costa. I'm here with Renzo Navarro, the winner of Swiss Round 5. Resilient Renzo being able to take down the Tyranitar All-Star Len Deuel. Renzo, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling very nervous still. It was a very hard matchup, but I'm feeling very good because 5-0 is the best you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. You're doing brilliantly well. So game 1, it was your Okidogi that was able to deliver the finishing blow, the Drain Punch onto the Terra Steel Garchomp. Talk to us about that game 1.
I actually practiced that matchup before because I found it somewhere, and it was maybe him. I knew it was very important to take out the Corviknight first. And, well, then in the late game, I would improvise, but Okidogi helped in that last turn, that first game.
Yeah, absolutely. But then in game 3, it didn't come, but you were still able to win. Talk to us about not bringing Okidogi in game 3.
Yeah. I mean, I was expecting him to bring the same mons.
Yeah.
So I thought for the late game, Lando was better than Okidogi.
Yeah, and absolutely, with Dragonite going for the Terra Fairy, the Sludge Bomb was such a threat, and Len had to play around you. Of course, game 2 went over to Len there. How were you feeling as that match was going on in game 2?
I mean, it's a pretty weird matchup because it's not something you see every day. It's not the most common team. I know he's a great player, but I think there were many 50-50s in the last turns. So unfortunately, I got them right.
Yeah, and I mean, Scale Shot being run on the Dragonite there as well. I mean, Scale Shot, is that a move? You said you'd practice against that team, but had you practiced against Scale Shot Dragonite in particular?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
It hits very hard.
Yeah. The scales were really balanced in your favor in the end there, but it could have gone either way.
Yeah, totally.
Well, congratulations to you, Renzo, 5-0, an absolutely incredible record. How are you feeling about your team? Do you think it's got what it takes?
it's good. It looks cool at least.
It absolutely looks cool. You've given our viewers at home an absolute treat. Now, Renzo, Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle?
Charmander, my first starter.
Okay, that's 3 votes for Charmander, 2 for Bulbasaur, still none for Squirtle. Where are you, Squirtle fans? Okay, Renzo, finally, any shout-outs you want to give?
To all my friends watching in Peru, it's very early there, so thank you if you're watching. To my parents, my girlfriend who is there filming.
That's wonderful to hear. If you are joining us from Peru, thank you so much for your dedication to the stream. Well then, that's round 5 done. We've just seen an okie dokie. Here we are, having a fantastic time at EUIC.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlie. What a great interview. And to get some insight from Renzo there as well, just fantastic. And good luck to Renzo and the rest of the tournament this weekend.